Julian Assange! Jail the war criminals! Free Julian Assange! We're the war criminals! No extradition! No extradition!
US, UK!
Hands off Assange! Jail the war criminals!
Stand the sunny side of the street.
I had an egg for breakfast. Sunny side up.
We have come here today to the United Kingdom's Guantanamo Bay, what they call HMP Belmarsh. Julian Assange, nearly 5 years, has suffered the cruel and brutal regime of UK's #1 political prisoner, journalist and publisher of WikiLeaks, and they intend to extradite him to the United States to face 175 years, possibly, at a supermax there. On the 20th and 21st of February this month, 2024, outside the Royal Court of Justice in the Strand, Julian will have his final say whether he gets to appeal this extradition. 2 justices will sit on the bench. Dame Carr, the Lord Chief Justice, Baroness of Walton-on-the-Hill, will be overseeing the most important freedom of information, freedom of the press case this century, if not in the past many centuries, where Julian Assange's fate will be decided. Come along on the 20th and 21st of February. Show your support for those visitors here today, for family and friends, and any detainee who may be released prior to the 20th to come down to the Royal Court. And I encourage the HMP staff, the Serco part-time zero-hour slave labour staff as well, if they are not working, or even if they are working on the 20th and 21st of February, to come down to the Royal Court of Justice to see British justice in action, and as if we fear they tread the wrong path, to make a protest, then on to the European Court of Human Rights. Free Julian Assange!
Free Julian Assange!
Good morning, Belmarsh!
Good morning, Potter.
Here we are again. Last time I was here, I tried to talk about how you might be feeling if you're not very happy with your job. And the problem then is, what do you do about it? I don't know what you do about it. Try looking at Ed Snowden on YouTube. What did he do about it when he realized that he was working for a bad government? The US government is pretty bad. He came to realize that he was part of their machine. So what do? The question is, can you stop helping the machine and still keep your privileges? And the answer is no, you can't. Because it's your own self
return. And that is the dilemma that you face. The job you might be doing here is no big deal, or it seems like no big deal, but if you step out of line, it's as if you've committed the biggest sin in the world. You get sacked. You lose your house. You lose your pension. You lose your friends. You lose your family. Everybody ostracizes you. That's what happens when you step out of line. But you know what? If you really think that you're doing something wrong, you have to speak out. You cannot not step out. So good luck to you. Good luck. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.
That is true. That is true.
Hello, everyone. We are here outside HMP Belmarsh on Saturday the 10th of February, which is about 10 days from when the last stage of Julian Assange's hearing process will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice in London, at the Aldwych. I want to talk about truth and knowing the truth and knowing what's right and what's wrong. It's wrong for a man to be held in a prison for 5 years in a supposedly well-run, democratic, lawful state without being charged with any crime. That's wrong. And all of us know it. It's wrong to incarcerate people who tell us about the crimes that our governments, those who are in power, don't want us to know about. That is what people like Julian Assange have done. He, as a publisher and a journalist for WikiLeaks, told us, the citizenry, about the crimes that were being committed, truthful information, the truth, that were being committed against other people in other parts of the world. Women, children, journalists, civilians, innocent people murdered by our states, by the US, and in complicity by the UK, who supplies armaments or the machinery to make armaments for all of these governments, particularly the US, which destroy and wish to control other countries around the world. That's a truth. That's wrong. I want to say something also about the way we treat our fellow human beings. And I want to say something particularly about the regimes of our prisons, our maximum security prisons, as they are called here, and the same thing in the States. The truth is, and everyone here, we all know it, and everyone in that building, whether prisoner or staff, knows that people who are sent to the United States to be incarcerated in their high security prisons are tortured. If anyone here thinks that isn't the truth, they are lying to themselves. And they know it. What will happen to Julian if he is extradited to the States unjustly, of course, to be tried in a court where he won't even be able to mount a quote-unquote defense when he hasn't even committed any crimes in that country and isn't even a citizen of that country. The treatment which will be meted out to him is savage. He will be strip-searched continually at every opportunity. His dignity will be assaulted at all times. He will be kept in a cell, a tiny cell, which will be lit all the time, 24 hours a day. He will be subjected to white noise also. He will have no contact with any other human being. 24 hours. His mental health, his physical health will be continually assaulted. And he's already going into that situation, if he does go into that situation, with severely weakened mental and physical health because of the regime which is practiced against prisoners in that monstrous building behind us. That is the truth. There is no gainsaying that, and it's wrong. It's wrong. And all of us, members of staff, prisoners for whom we have sympathy, who share these conditions here with Julian, with ourselves, with our moral selves, all of us must look to our consciences and act. And the way we can act with regard to Julian, this one man, try to stop this one horrendous brutality against this one human being, is to be outside the Royal Courts of Justice on the 20th of February at 8:30, to stay, to be present, to be visible, to be on the streets, to say, this is not right, this is wrong. And on the 21st, the following day, same thing. No watching it online, no saying, yes, I've done my bit, particularly if you live in London. No saying, oh, I just found out about it, it's half term, I've got this and that thing to do. No. There are moments when we must act. Our consciences ask us to do that, and if we are listening to our consciences, we will do that. And that means being on the streets. Thank you.
Okay. So here I am outside Belmarsh prison, where my friend is about 100 metres away. And I was once where he was going in a courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, being deported from the United States as a national security threat, according to the US Air Force, which is very flattering at some, but I think it's a good indication of how insecure they are in the middle of an empire that is crumbling. All empires crumble. They overextend, they collapse in the middle. You can watch, what's Russell Crowe's movie, Gladiator. That's about post-imperial Rome. Go to Budapest, they're all pining for the Greater Hungary. I think there should be American tourists going to Budapest to see what post-empire looks like. Great architecture, but very fading. Now, my co-defendant in this case, when we broke into Griffiths Air Force Base on New Year's Day 91 and made our way to a B-52 bomber and a runway and put it out of action, other B-52s from that place were deployed to Fairfield, England? Fairfield. And they dropped napalm, cluster bombs and fuel their explosives at a similar yield to a small nuclear weapon on the children of Iraq. But our B-52 bomber did not get to participate. We found out at trial it did not fly for the length of the first Gulf War. Now, last weekend was the 3rd of February, and that was the anniversary when we broke into Shannon Airport in neutral Ireland, where 3 million US troops passed through to invade Iraq. Now, my grandfather fought and killed for an independent Ireland, and your Irish neutrality doesn't come from an innate Irish fear of being up for a fight, because they're often up for a fight. It comes from a militant anti-conscription movement led by a Scouser, James Larkin, and a Glaswegian, James Connolly, who was in the British Army for 7 years, against the imperialist bloodbath of World War I that Bishop Mannix described as a nasty little trade war. And that's why we didn't have conscription in Australia, because we had Bishop Mannix, who wasn't a pacifist, but he was an Irish Republican, who opposed World War I. And the government was defeated twice in referendums on conscription in World War I. It didn't happen to the Kiwis. They didn't only send their draft prisoners to jail, they sent them to the front where they crucified them. Read Archibald Baxter. Now, Julian, there used to be a slogan in the 70s in Australia, life on the dole is a full-time job. I can tell you, being homeless in London is a full-time job. Where am I going to eat? Am I going to eat? Can I get a bit of a wash anywhere? Probably a McDonald's, where you meet a lot of homeless people, including British combat veterans who were groomed as children, who were exploited at the peak of their lives, and literally left on the, like trash on the streets of the city. Now, when we disabled a US warplane and sent it back to Texas, so it didn't go to Iraq in 2003, WikiLeaks revealed cables from the US Embassy in Dublin offering to pull out of Ireland and fly onto their bases in England. And the Irish government, the Republican Fianna Fáil government, begged for the Yanks to stay. And they renditioned people to Guantanamo through there. Now, the reason people at that airport working there didn't experience any trauma, because the only US soldiers they saw were in the peak of their health. They brought the corpses back through Saudi Arabia, and they were made invisible. When I was growing up during the Vietnam War, they would show you footage of flag-draped coffins coming off at Andrews Air Force Base to boost, the morale. They did not have any photographs of any coffins until someone snuck onto one of these planes in Saudi Arabia and took a photograph, right? So, this is the media. This is what Julian Assange challenged. Julian, who went to 34 schools, never completed a university degree, and hated by The Guardian out of petty professional jealousy. Those tops at The Guardian would have him tortured in here because they feel a bit jealous, that he became a rock star overnight in 29. And like my friend Phil Berrigan was on the front page of Time magazine in 1968 when his fellow brother and fellow priest Daniel Berrigan were two of the top most wanted by the FBI for burning draft cards at Catonsville. They went from the front page of Time magazine to becoming invisible. And Dan came back from a trip to the Holy Lands and said, the Israeli state may be the death of Judaism, which would be a bad thing because they produced Bob Dylan, Karl Marx, Leonard Cohen, and a lot of other interesting people. But this is Zionism, and this appears to me the only thing the Zionists learned out of the Nazi experience was how to recreate the Warsaw Ghetto, ethnic cleansing, and the final solution. How to get a blank check to duplicate fascism that won World War II was because the United States created fascism in South America, in Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Fascism won the day in World War II, whatever Hollywood tells you. And Hollywood would tell you it's an American-German war. It was a Russian-German war. And, I'm not a big fan of Marxism or Putin, but you could say the Russians saved Europe from the Nazis. You could say Putin saved Russia from the Americans, because the alcoholic Yeltsin, who couldn't get off his plane at Shannon Airport when all the Irish dignitaries are lined up because he was too drunk on the plane, was giving the farm and everything else away to the Americans, And imagine a hostile force, or Mexico joining the Warsaw Pact, or Canada, or you imagine even little Grenada trying to be independent and see what kind of response you'll get from the Yanks, And now the Americans and the British will cut and run from the Ukraine, like they cut and run from Afghanistan, like they cut and run from Iraq, like they cut and run from Vietnam. And it'll happen overnight, and who'll be left out to dry will be the Ukrainian people. Now, my friend is the head of the Hare Krishnas, an Irish guy, apparently a good Irish dancer. I'd like to see him do that in a sarong. And also is a good musician. He's got bullet holes in his food van that pulls up at Camden at 1 o'clock every day to feed the homeless from his trip to the Ukraine. And these are people making non-violent, serious intervention in this war. And any war resistor in Russia or Ukraine needs to be supported. The only anti-war prisoner in this country I know of is Julian Assange. He's never mentioned at an anti-war rally in this country. Why? Because those mainstream groups are the first line of policing. Where the left disappeared, all our good activists were into NGOs in the 80s to police the poor. You know, I've got a friend I used to work with. His father used to fly drugs in for Oliver North. He's an Irish pilot. And he works at a place in Temple Bar where you can get a feed for free. But they have a little laptop and they take every homeless person who walks into that place and they give it to the cops. Because it's cheaper to keep them on the streets with these charities than lock them up. Locking people up is very expensive. Now, I've spent 13 months in US prisons. I hardly met anyone who had a trial. It's all pleas bargaining and horse trading. They threaten you with 30 years, they offer you 5, you take the 5, and you're not going to risk the 30. Do I think they're going to extradite Julian Assange from a country where people are subjects of the kings of a king and have no rights to a country where people are citizens of a republic with a First Amendment defending free speech in an election year when the Democrats blame this guy for Clinton losing? It was a shit candidate, a shit campaign. That's why they lost. And no, I think they'll cut him loose and kill him. That's what I think, but I could be wrong. It's only speculation. I don't have any inside knowledge. Now, I've had a Palestinian experience this week because they levelled my camp at Christmas, you know, no room at the inn. And then I rebuilt the camp, and yesterday they levelled it again. And that's what the Palestinians do. They gather the rubble, they build a house, and it gets levelled. And these are serious times, and we've got a generation that is heavily sedated and distracted. You know, it's like the rock music Tommy. They're deaf, dumb, and blind. They've got earpods in their ears constantly. They're deaf. They got their face in a phone and their head up their arse. They're blind. And they can't give you accurate street directions. They are dumb. And they haven't got, as Ronald Reagan said about the hippies, you know, make love, not war. They don't look capable of either activity. I don't think this generation is ready for World War III. The Pope reckons it's already underway. Putin told Tucker Carlson, you put American boots on the ground in Ukraine, you've got World War III. These are very serious times, and one of the most serious people is beyond these walls. There's only one decision.
No extradition!
There's only one decision.
No extradition!
US! UK! US! UK!
Hands off Assange!
You can run, but you can't hide!